Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Vecchiola. I work for the Open Tech Alliance team, and I am the marketing manager and auction buyer advocate for the StorageTreasures.com website. Last year, Open Tech purchased a majority stake in StorageTreasures.com and now manages the website. I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, Legal Issues for Online Self-Storage Lien Auction Buyers, hosted by StorageTreasures.com and presented by attorneys Scott Zucker and Carlos Caslow. I will begin the presentation after a quick introduction of the industry's most respected attorneys, Scott Zucker and Carlos Caslow. Scott Zucker is a founding partner in the law firm of Wiseman Zucker. Scott represents self-storage owners and managers throughout the country on legal matters in the areas of foreclosure and lien sales, premises liability, loss control safeguards, ADA defense, and employment disputes. Scott is Deputy General Counsel to the National Self-Storage Association, legal counsel to a number of state self-storage associations, and a frequent lecturer of the National Self-Storage Conventions, and is a contributing legal writer for trade magazines. He's also a partner with Carlos Caslow in the Self-Storage Legal Network, a subscription-based legal services for self-storage owners and managers available to SSA members. Now, Carlos Caslow serves as the General Counsel. Sorry, I'm going to move that over. Carlos Caslow serves as General Counsel to the Self-Storage Association. He is the editor of the Self-Storage Legal Review, the SSA's legal periodical. He is a founding partner of the Self-Storage Legal Network, the industry's only telephone and email legal information service. Carlos has provided legal consulting services to the nation's largest self-storage and mobile storage operators. Carlos has also worked with the SSA on its self-storage state legislative project by drafting legislation, working with lobbyists, and providing testimony before state legislators. He is also the co-author of the SSA's state self-storage lien law annotated series that now covers over 25 states. In addition, he has also written the Self-Storage Legal Network's Guide to Drafting Your Own Rental Agreement, Everyday Business Forms for the Self-Storage Operators, and the Self-Storage Collections and Lien Sale Handbook. So now, before I hand this over to the attorneys, I want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box below. We'll answer those questions at the end of the session. And also stay tuned after the presentation for some extras from the Storage Treasures team. So welcome, gentlemen. I will hand the floor over now to you.
Welcome. This is Carlos Caslow, and welcome to the Auction Buyers webinar. What we're going to do is try to give you some of the legal background on both the lien statute and the auctions themselves that take place when, unfortunately, self-storage customers are unable to pay their rent. To date, we have 49 states and the District of Columbia all have statutory lien laws that permit the sale of tenant goods when they are unable or just refuse to pay their rent. Traditionally, these auctions have been done in person, but over the last 3 or 4 years, the online auction has become a popular means of doing so. It is, if you kind of think about it, what it really does is it provides a bigger megaphone when a self-storage auction is being offered, because the buyers can basically stay at their residence or their business and view the spaces and usually have something in the vicinity of 7 to 14 days to bid on spaces that they find interesting. We think this technology is really interesting, and I think more importantly, from a buyer's perspective, more and more operators are taking advantage of the online auction format. And I think it can work very well for both the owner and the buyer of the auction. One of the things to keep in mind is that self-storage auctions may be a little different than other types of auctions that you may attend or deal with. And that's because the goal, at least from the owner's perspective, is a little bit different than is traditionally the case with auctions. In most auctions, it's simply high bid gets the property and that's the end of it. But in self-storage, there's really two goals. One, yes, to recover funds for the payment of rent, but perhaps just as important, in some cases maybe more important, it is also to get the property out of the storage unit. So the buyer really performs an important function as far as the storage operator is concerned, because it facilitates getting those spaces that are not generating revenue back into inventory. The money received from the auctions is basically used to pay down the tenant's indebtedness, and if there is excess funds, that money probably in most instances will go to the tenant, and if the tenant is unavailable, ultimately it typically goes to actually the state in which the sale is conducted. But the idea here is that keep in mind that the sale has some nuances that are a little different from perhaps other types of auctions you may be familiar. Scott, do you have some comments on this?
Hey, Carlos, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited that we're able to do a program from the buyer and bidder perspective, because it's a little unique to hear from industry lawyers that work helping operators sell their tenants' goods when they don't pay the rent. So welcome to everyone. And I did want to sort of add a different perspective a little bit to Carlos's description of the lien law, so that the folks that are listening understand that really what makes this sale process really different from most others that you may attend is the fact that this is a statutory required process. So when a tenant doesn't pay the rent, the operator is directed how to dispose of the tenant's goods through a statutory remedy that's spelled out very clearly in these multiple state statutes. And what it provides is a self-help remedy where they can sell the tenant's goods through notice procedures without having to go to court. And that's sort of a unique remedy in the world of other landlord-tenant situations, that there's an opportunity to do this self-help remedy. But I also wanted to point out that in mostly all of these state lien laws, there is reference to the buyers and protections that they have for participating in these lien sales and buying the tenant's goods. I want to make sure you all know about that. As long as you are a bona fide purchaser for value, meaning there's no conspiracy with the seller to arrange for a low price or something else, as long as there's an independent bidding process and you purchase the property, you're free from any liability associated with taking the property of the tenant that's provided to you by the operator and the seller at the facility. The law protects you at these lien sales, and I guess we could all say that, if the law wasn't there to protect you, why would you take the risk of participating in these auctions? The law speaks very specifically to the fact that you are protected from liability, even if the operator, the facility operator, and the seller in this instance does it wrong. It doesn't follow the state law properly. As long as you are an independent bidder for reasonable value, there's no potential liability to you as a bidder. And I just want to make sure you know that you're included in the law and protected under that law. And then lastly, I would just say that if you can perceive these lien sales, these online lien sales, to simply be just a different platform or method for doing the sales as compared to the live sales, that's really the only difference. Rather than having to be at the facilities bidding with all the other people bidding against you, maybe feeling as if you're in an uncomfortable situation because of the number of people, or threatened or harassed anyway by being a participant in the auctions, you get the safety and security of bidding from your homes or offices on the property, and the high bidder wins. So hopefully, as we move into the new technology of online lien sales, it'll enhance your buying and bidding experience, and hopefully for the better. Carlos, any other thoughts on the lien law?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you brought up about the fact that there is legal protection for the buyer. And essentially, again, as long as there's not collusion or something between the buyer and the storage facility, that essentially when they take the property, all rights for litigation, etc., against the buyer are effectively cut off by statute. And so you can take that property with a high degree of confidence, and you're not kind of worried that, well, somebody may claim that the sale was not done properly or something like this. Once that sale is final, and we'll talk about that in more detail, you're not really much at risk in terms of having to, in terms of having been the successful bidder. So I guess we're going to move on now to some of the other issues that we're going to cover now.
Yeah. So we want to sort of take the folks into the world of the online auction. And for those of you who have participated in some of these over the last year or so, you're visualizing the property through photographs. Obviously, the difference is you're not there personally to bid on the items. You're relying on the photographs that are provided by the managers that take the pictures of the unit once the doors open, as part of the lien process, where the operator has the right to cut the lock, open the unit door, take photographs, identify what's in the space, and then post that on the website for you to see. So what you need to understand as a bidder and buyer, and those of you who have participated understand this, is that everything is purchased, as is and based upon the images that you see. There's no expectation that the seller knows what's in any of these boxes or the condition of anything that you're seeing. Literally, what you see is what you get, and you cannot go into these auctions having any expectation that there are any representations concerning or warranties concerning what you may be buying from what you see in these pictures. And I understand that's a risk, but I think Carlos and I would both agree that part of this lien foreclosure process is an auction that allows you to purchase items at a discounted rate based upon the circumstances that the property is being sold, just like Carlos said, as a means for the operator to recover its lost rent and potentially, and for the purpose of emptying the unit. So you certainly have a motivated seller when you have an operator selling a tenant's unit to reclaim that space and rent it to a paying tenant, and therefore you get sort of the benefit of the bargain as part of the bidding process. So as long as you go into it understanding that there's no representations or warranties with respect to what you're seeing, that the pictures are as fair of a depiction that can be provided by the manager or seller of the unit, the law does limit the manager from opening the boxes and basically inventorying everything that's in the space. So you're provided general descriptions and these photographs, and hopefully that will be enough to motivate you to be inquisitive about the potential of what might be in the space and bid appropriately so that there's a commercially reasonable value given for the items that are in the space. Carlos, any thoughts on that with regard to the images and the marketing of the spaces?
Yeah, no, you covered that very well. I think one of the things that always come up, and we kind of see that in this picture, as you see, in the middle one, some boxes that may or may not have something in them. We have on the, the one on the right, we have some trunks. And I think it's really important that the buyers understand there may be nothing in these boxes. With respect to the trunks, those probably have some value in and of themselves because they look very nice, and there's nothing in them. It doesn't matter. But you see cardboard boxes oftentimes, and you just don't know. And it's important to understand that this is a distress sale. And it's going to be sold to the highest bidder, and that may not be the best price for what's in the space, but it may be, because there's this element of mystery, it may be more than it's worth, and that essentially is the risk of being an auction buyer. And you do have to be a little bit discerning, and I think with experience, most buyers kind of learn what to look for when these spaces come up for bid. I think that the the one on the right, if you had some knowledge about steamer trunks and that kind of thing, you might say even if there's nothing in them, those are pretty nice pieces of to have, and they are easily resellable. In the middle space, who knows what's in there? I mean, it's a little harder to tell. And generally, we're looking at one picture. In most of the lien sales, there'll be multiple pictures from multiple angles to give you a better sense of what you're looking at. And the one on the left is sort of kind of a hodgepodge of stuff. But somebody may say, well, that item back there, would certainly cover whatever my bid is. So you have to sort of learn what self-storage auctions are all about. And over time, most of the buyers become pretty discerning on the spaces they bid on.
And Carlos, I will add that you said something that I think is very true. When you see boxes, and especially we see this happen in the industry a lot, you'll see large TV boxes. Well, I'm sure the buyers understand the risk that either there's a TV in there or there's not, or if there's a TV in there, it may or may not work. But they may be paying a few cents on the dollars for the assumption of a TV, and maybe in fact there is a large TV in there that does work, and this is a result of someone just moving from one home to another and has been unable to pay their rent. So I think we all can agree that there may be hidden treasures, but there's no representation of treasures in these spaces. It's the upside of a distressed sale, and I think these buyers and bidders that are listening, some of you probably have great stories of success from what you've seen in there, and others maybe stories of disappointment as to expectations. But it's all part of the process. So Carlos, you're covering auction rules?
Right. So auction rules. I think the way to best think of the auction rules, and there will be auction rules when you become a bidder on the Storage Treasures platform, is to think of it as sort of the contract, if you will, or the deal between the auction bidders and ultimately the seller of the space. These are the rules. This is the agreement we have entered into that govern this online sale process. And generally, it's pretty straightforward. In terms of how it works, the property will be posted for a period of time. There will be incremental bidding that will go on during this time, and ultimately, the high bidder the sale will close, and the high bidder will be determined, and that person will be entitled to go to the facility and remove the property from the space. But there are, again, as we've said, there's some nuances, and we're going to get to those with self-storage sales that you do have to be aware of when you're thinking in terms of the bidding process, and also when a sale is final and these kind of issues. Scott?
Yeah, no, I think it's very important for the bidders and buyers that are interested in participating in these auctions to look at the rules that are provided by Storage Treasures with respect to what they're agreeing to, and it is a contract as part of the participation in the process. As we walk through this program today, you'll hear some of those rules and some of those expectations. But the most important part, in my mind, is that everyone goes in understanding how it works. So that from a lawyer perspective, we want everyone to go in understanding the rules, so that if there's any confusion or misunderstanding during the process, they can always reflect back on the written rules that are part of the process, so that no one feels they're being taken advantage of, or that something was done to them if the process goes south. And we'll learn about cancellation of sales and situations where the sale can't go through. And we just don't want people to say, hey, you can't do that. Because unfortunately, in the world of self-storage, there are situations where sales are canceled, and we want our bidders and buyers to understand the rules as they enter into the participation in the process. So make sure you read those rules, and make sure you understand them before you participate. I don't think they're onerous, Carlos. I think they're straightforward with respect to how most sales work generally in the auction world, but they're provided specifically for self-storage sales, and it's important for everyone to understand what they're getting themselves into. Yeah. So let's sort of dig down a little bit with respect to the auction rules, and we don't want to sort of beat a dead horse on this question from your perspective as to what you're buying. But again, these three items referenced on the slide are really the key essential understanding elements of being a participant in an auction. Understanding that you're bidding on what you see and you're buying it as is. The sales are final, meaning if you see a TV in there and you take it home and it doesn't work, you're not returning it. It's not a sale of that nature. You are buying things that basically on the assumption that you make with respect to the condition and the value and the ability to use or resell the items that you're buying as part of a self-storage auction. As part of that, the operator, by allowing you to participate in the sale, is not making any representations or guarantees.
Hello? Hello? Are you there, Scott? Okay, auction rules. Let's talk about the sort of this breach of contract idea and exactly how that works. When you make a bid and when you're the successful bidder, you have an obligation. You've undertaken an obligation, and that obligation is that you're going to go to the facility within the time frame authorized by the sale. You're going to tender the amount due, and if you're not a reseller, if you're buying for your own account, you don't have a resale license or something that makes you may be required to pay sales tax as part of the purchase price. If you've got a resale license or something like that, and what you intend to do is you have sort of a used property shop or something like that, that's fine. But you may be required to pay sales tax if you're not a reseller of the property. And your final obligation is to clean out the property from the storage unit. Now, there's always a possibility, for whatever reason, somebody does not perform on their contract. And what happens to a storage treasurer's buyer if they don't perform? Well, the first step is to actually offer the property to the runner-up in the bidding. And this is a way whereby the self-storage facility operator and storage treasurers can help mitigate the potential damages for non-performance. Because if the backup buyer agrees to take the property at their bid, the differential may be $10 or something like that, and that might be covered by any deposits, etc. So just realize that when you do bid, you've entered into a contract to do certain things. And what is really important is that you go to the facility within the time frame permitted, and two, that when you tender the funds required, and that three, you clean out the storage space. And if you do those three things, or you rent another space and keep your stuff in, that's fine too. But if you've done those things, you've fulfilled your contract obligations. And so where things get a little sticky is you decide, well, I'll just take the stuff I want and I'll leave the rest of the stuff in there. Well, there are ways that can be addressed by the storage operator, but just try to, understand the basics on what your obligations are, and if you're the high bidder, make sure that you fulfill that obligation. And that's really what this, what we really want to make sure you understand here is that it's not just something where, well, if I like the stuff, I'll take it. That's not the way it works. Scott?
Yeah, so sorry about being disconnected there. Yeah, Carlos, great explanation of the contract obligations of the bidders. Again, from my perspective, if they're getting the benefit of that bargain at a discounted price for the property, there is then also the conditional responsibilities that they have under that bid being accepted, that they fulfill that contract by making the payments, coming to the property, and removing all the goods. So I think you did a great job on summarizing that, and I guess we can move to the next one, why are auctions canceled? And the reason we wanted to talk about this is because in the context of self-storage, again, from what Carlos described earlier, is there's a rent default which triggers the lien foreclosure process. But also under that same statute, there is a provision where the tenant, even though they're in default and charges are accruing as to what they owe, at the end of the day, after they're given notice, they always have the opportunity to come in and pay to reclaim their own property before the property is transferred to you, even if you're a bidder at an auction. The definition of when a sale is completed, we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, but before that completion of sale, they have the ability to pay the rent and charges that are owed, and the unit can be returned to them. And if you think about it, it's probably the right thing to happen anyway, because these are people's possessions that are being stored. Sometimes people get sort of sideways in terms of their payment obligations, and now they're given notice of the opportunity to cure, and then they come forward and pay the rent. That would be an appropriate reason to let them have their property back and to simply cancel the auction. So there are circumstances where that might happen. There are also circumstances where the tenant wants to pay and would do whatever it could to pay, but it can't. It's in a hard situation that otherwise can't find the funds to pay, and they go to the operator and they ask for some rent concession and forgiveness, and the operator may choose to do that. These are business operators that work to satisfy their customers and do well in their community. So there may be circumstances where they simply let a tenant come and get their property and cancel the sale without even being paid the full amount that's owed. That's always a right that the operator has to cancel a sale and give the property back to the actual owner. Another situation is when an error is found in the lien process. And as we talked about before, this is a statutory requirement that the operators must follow with regard to notices. And within those statutory requirements are very clear timelines that must be followed. And before the item can be sold at an auction, typically operators will go back and verify that they've met all of the notice and timeline requirements. And sometimes, even after best efforts are made to follow the rules completely, someone may catch an error. And if they catch an error, they have to stop the sale. So that would be another reason why, having nothing to do with the bidders or buyers, the unit is withdrawn from the auction process, and the operator in this case would have to start the process all over again. A couple other quick ones with respect to why auctions may be canceled. Tenant at the eve of the lien sale may file bankruptcy. And for those of you who are familiar with bankruptcy laws, that creates a stay on all creditor actions, stops foreclosures, whether it be home foreclosures, car repossessions, or self-storage auctions. And the operator, once given notice of the bankruptcy, can't proceed with the lien sale. Just has to stop by law, by federal law. And in that case, the sale would be canceled. Again, no action against the operator or the bidder or the buyer. It's just how the law is until the bankruptcy can be worked out with the tenant. Another situation would be that the tenant notifies the operator that they are active military, and there's another federal law called the Service Member Civil Relief Act, which protects those that are on active duty of the military, that they cannot be subject to self-help foreclosure like a self-storage lien sale, and therefore that unit would have to be pulled from the auction. So again, these are a number of situations where things might happen, and I know you're out there looking at these units and being interested in bidding, and sometimes these units have to be pulled from the auction website. The sales need to be canceled or postponed based upon these circumstances that are outside the control of the operator and outside your control as the bidder or the buyer. Carlos, thoughts on cancellations?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that to keep in mind is while they do occur, a particular space is pulled from a sale or something like that, sort of the last minute cancellation or the last minute pulling from the sale does not happen often. Now, this takes place over a number of days, and during that period, spaces will be pulled, but you're not going to run into a lot of situations. It does happen, but not in large numbers where the day of the sale or even after the sale, the property was returned to the buyer. It can happen, but it does not happen often. one other issue, and it has to do with sale cancellation, that actually Storage Treasure solves. It's no longer going to be a problem for the auction buyer is weather-related cancellations. These happen, with a certain, some frequency, especially in the Midwest and Eastern states where the weather can be a problem, especially during the winter months. And one of the really great things about the online auction is it is not susceptible to weather cancellation. These sales will just proceed in a normal fashion. It may be a little more difficult for the eventual buyer to get to the storage space, but we're not going to be dealing with those kind of problems, which do occur. So there's actually good something really good, positive from the online sale for the prospective buyers. They're not going to have to worry about a particular kind of cancellation that was did occur when we had on-site sales.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely a great point about the weather that I hadn't thought of. Is certainly, it really gives a lot of regularity to these auctions that, like you said, otherwise at the last minute could be impacted based upon weather. I mean, and the other thing is, I guess people need to realize, and you mentioned it with regard to the giving a larger megaphone to lien sales, is there are certain states that require that there be a minimum number of bidders to even have what's called a commercially reasonable sale. And sometimes when weather hits and few people appear at a live auction, the sale can't go forward because they don't have enough people bidding. That's not something that you see in these online auctions where you have a wider radius of potential participants and viewers to the site, and those constitute potential bidders, making the sale itself a commercially reasonable sale, as long as they have a certain number of minimum attendees to the website.
Yeah, and I think that and again, we don't want to kind of dwell on this too much about auction cancellation, but again, there is a chance that you won't be able to get the unit even though you won the online auction. And some of this, from a auction buyer standpoint, is something you need to know. If you are the high bidder, it is in your interest to proceed to the facility and take care of the space ASAP, because if you dawdle in this situation, there is the chance that you will lose out on the space that you bid on. So if even though you may have 48 hours or some period of time before you actually have to clean out the space, you're well advised to move quickly if it's a space that you really want, because at that point, once you've secured that, taken the property and from the facility, then at that point the sale can't be unwound. So you don't want to dawdle.
Right. And just to clarify that point a little bit, Carlos, is the fact that the risk is by waiting that the tenant still can come in before the high bidder has come to the facility to claim the property and make the payment. They still have that right to make their payment to get their property back. So by shortening that window of opportunity for the tenant and having the high bidder come to the facility, reclaim their property even less than the typical 48-hour recovery period, will support the ability for that bidder to claim the property. Otherwise, there is that last-minute risk that it could be purchased back by the tenant. So that's a really good point. So let's move to the next one. How much will you pay if you win? So for those of you who are new to the website for Storage Treasures, you'll see the sort of the methodology of how the system works with respect to your participation as a bidder on the site, both with respect to the buyer fees that are offered, as well as the requirement that you may have to pay a purchase deposit at the time that you become the high bidder of the unit. But most importantly is how much will you pay if you win? You pay the high bid sales price, sales tax to the extent that the operator is in a jurisdiction that requires a sales tax being added to the sale price for the unit. Again, you would be able to avoid that sales tax if you are a reseller and have the proper tax ID information. And you may have to pay a refundable cleaning deposit to motivate you to make sure that you take everything from the space and leave it clean, because if you don't, and the operator has to spend money to clean out the space, you'll lose your deposit. So, you may think to yourself it's a little harsh that after being a buyer, you have to additionally pay a deposit, but unfortunately, and I think many of you probably have experienced this, there are bidders out there that will come in and cherry pick what's in the space, leaving the bulk of the other items in the space that may not have any value to the operator, and the operator has to spend a lot of money to clean out the space. One of the benefits you get as a bidder on a distressed unit is, you take the good with the bad, and therefore the obligation is to remove everything from the space. And by providing a deposit, by cleaning out the unit, you'll get your deposit back. And we see that with a lot of operators. But again, this cleaning deposit situation is based upon the operator's discretion. It's not a requirement of storage treasures, but they'll let you know about that as part of the sale if the operator that they're working with requires it as part of the purchase. Carlos, any thoughts on the pay for bidders?
Yeah, you covered this very well. And the only thing that I wanted to mention again is the deposit part of the transaction, because and it's tied to what you're agreeing to when you buy a self-storage space, because it's not just tendering the money, it's removing the property, which in many cases is more important to the operator than the money received on the sale, because it's not unusual for spaces to sell for $10, $20. And factually, from the owner's standpoint, having the property removed from the facility is obviously worth more to them than what was the high bid on a particular space that did not look attractive, perhaps, to the bidders. So just be aware that from the owner's perspective, oftentimes getting the stuff off the premises is what they're doing. If you do it promptly, you could, theoretically, you could give them the deposit can be taken in the morning and returned in the afternoon. But it really is to understand what the owner is looking for when they are selling spaces that often go for $10, $20, $50. It's not just that revenue. It's also the cleaning out of the storage space.
And I do want to mention one other thing, and this actually came up as a legal issue with respect to the purchase deposit. Just because a bidder pays a deposit to secure its high bid as part of the purchase of a unit at sale does not consummate the sale. The sale is not completed by the transfer and the payment of the deposit. And as we mentioned before, the sale is really only completed when the high bidder then goes to the facility, pays the balance of the sales price, and removes the property. Just because you may have paid a deposit, it is possible that the sale could be canceled after making that payment, and you don't have the argument that you've bought the unit. I mean, we hear that sort of, hey, I paid 10%. It's my unit. Unfortunately, again, based upon the rules, the sale is only completed when the full payment is made and possession is taken of the property. So, Carlos, you want to take us on to the next one, finalizing the sale?
Finalizing the sale. And again, we're going to be looking at some of the things we've looked at in some of the earlier slides. But the typical sale will conclude during business hours. And so, and what that, and part of that is to both, it's for the owner and for the bidder, that once the bidder knows that they have secured, that they are the high bidder on the space, they can immediately make arrangements for going to the facility and picking up the property. If it's nearby, they could actually do it the same day. But there will be a window of opportunity. Generally, it's somewhere between 24 and 72 hours in which they have to go to the facility and arrange to move the property off the facility. Now, the buyer is going to be required to do certain things before they're going to be given access to the property. One thing they're going to need to bring is their storage treasures documentation that they're the high bidder on the space. Two, they're going to need to bring the funds to pay for their bid, and realize that in most instances, the storage operator is probably going to require cash, money order, or certified funds. So make sure that you have, and I think in most instances it'll be cash payment, that you have the cash when you go to the facility and you to claim your space, because you don't want to be there and say, well, I thought I could. It's going to be a cash. They theoretically they don't know who you are, and they're not going to get into a situation where they put this on a credit card. Some might, or take a personal check. It's usually cash on the barrelhead in most instances. So you're not going to get access to your space until you sort of clear these initial hurdles. And again, there may be a cleaning deposit that is requested, that is part of the transaction, but that will be refunded to you once once the property is removed from the space. So a lot of this should be sort of, kind of maybe a bit obvious, but just make sure that when you go to the space, after you are the high bidder, you are prepared. And I think the two things you might want to make sure you have, because again, there's a little bit of a disconnect in the sale and actually acquiring the property, is that you have your storage treasures documentation with you and you have proper identification with you. The next item on the finalization thing is again, we've been talking about the documentation is a success. You may be provided with, certain items like a bill of sale or a receipt of your funds. Generally, it'd be in the form of receipt. It may be a little bit different, and we'll talk about this momentarily, when you're dealing with an automobile or other type of title property. But just your basic property, you'll probably get some kind of receipt that for your funds that you were the successful bidder or something like that from the operator. And the last item you're going to get is that you do have to be aware that you have a certain time frame, and that if you go beyond that time frame, there may be daily storage charges that you will be subject to until you do get the property off get the property off the facility, or you rent a storage unit to put the property into. So just realize that that once you're the high bidder, you still have some things that you have to do to make that sale final and complete. Scott?
Yeah, let me add a couple things there before we get to the vehicle issue. Is this 24, 48, or 72 hours, and again, it's different with different operators as to how much time they'll give you to come and get the property, make the payment, remove the property from the space. But as Carlos said, that they also are very open to you becoming a tenant at their facilities as well. So, if this is a situation where you want to come to the facility, pay for the unit, and then become a tenant in the space of that space, that abandoned space, certainly they're not going to turn you away from being a tenant, understanding that these are month-to-month leases. You have the ability to be a tenant in that space. You can't, however, take your time beyond the allotted amount of time to remove the property. In most of the rules for operators, you'll find, different from what Carlos said, although it's possible in some circumstances, the operators will charge you a holdover fee beyond the 24, 48, or 72 hours if you don't reclaim the property or sign a lease. There are other rules for particular operators that if you don't pick up the property by the required time period, you've agreed to abandon the property that you basically were the high bidder for. So again, this goes back to the breach of contract that we talked about earlier, that if you don't come, let's say it's a 48-hour period, if you don't come within the 48 hours, you relinquish your right to the property that you were the high bidder. Presumably you waive your deposit. There may be other fees that you're responsible for, and the unit can be then sold to the next high bidder. So be very careful about reading those rules to what happens if you're late getting to the game after you've been the high bidder on the unit, because there may be implications by not making it in a time that force you to spend more money, or will require you to lose the property that you bid on. So I guess we can turn to autos. Carlos, is that right?
Yes,
okay.
And I know we're on autos, and I think the one thing to remember about vehicles is that it's a little different when you deal with vehicles, trailers, and certain types of watercraft than when you're bidding on just general personal property. And the big difference is that the states really have, oftentimes the sales are a little bit outside the standard self-storage sale rules, because we have the Department or Division of Motor Vehicles involved in these type of sales. And there's probably about 2 or 3 different patterns that states follow. Some you'll be at a sale and it's what am I bid, and ultimately it's up to the buyer to simply to register the vehicle. You'll be given obviously a bill of sale on the vehicle, and there may even be a form, a DMV form or something like that, that has been filled out by the operator, and with that you go and you take care of registration. In other situations, in other states, and again this is state by state, the operator has made some arrangements on the title. The sale goes forward. You'll be given some documentation that again that the operator is prepared, and you should be able to register the vehicle. But again, this is a little more complicated than when you're just dealing with ordinary personal property. So when you're dealing with things with a license plate of some kind, it can get a bit tricky. The item on the left, on the right, is clearly a vehicle that's subject to registration. The one on the right, it's a piece of, it's a piece of equipment. It may or may not be something that's subject to registration and what you need to do. But when you're dealing with watercraft trailers and boats, just realize the process and some of the administration of the sale is likely to be different than when you're just dealing with ordinary property. Scott?
Yeah, let me dig a little further into this for those folks who are listening that are interested in the vehicle, boat, RV, equipment type purchases, because just like you said, Carlos, those are unique items for sale because there is a registration and title issue that applies that doesn't apply to a couch, a chair, a refrigerator, or clothing. So it does require a little extra time to understand what it means to buy property that may be titled. And you're right, Carlos, this is also a state-by-state issue. In certain states, it's very easy where they can be a bidder, get the paperwork from the seller operator and take it to DMV and get a replacement title for the vehicle that they purchased at a lien foreclosure auction. Really simple. Others, it is a requirement for the operator to get title in their name, the facility's name, before the auction occurs so that they can deliver title to the buyer. There's also circumstances when the vehicle or boat or RV is in such a condition that it may not be drivable or workable that it could be sold without title and for parts only. So the buyer needs to understand what they're getting as part of the process. And if you are a person who's interested in buying a titled property at one of your self-storage auctions in your particular state, it makes sense for you to contact your DMV in advance of bidding, confirming with them or through your own counsel what the requirements are so that you go into a lien sale knowing what you need in order to retitle the car, the boat, or RV that you're buying. It just makes sense for you to go into these sort of transactions with your eyes wide open as to the obligations that you may have walking out of the sale with a bill of sale, because if you buy it without title as your bill of sale and your expectation was that you were going to be able to take it and drive it down the street and you just bought something that was given to you without title, well then you've just bought a bunch of steel that you have no expectation that you were buying it to drive it, and you signed a bill of sale that no title was transferred. So you have to be aware and open to the possibility that titled property sales are different, and you have to go into them knowing what your expectations are about what you're buying, and making sure that the paperwork that you're being given by the operator will provide you what your goal is with respect to what you're buying.
Well, one final.
Carlos, did that make sense?
No, that makes perfect
does that
sense. I agree with that
okay?
because it is a little more complex than when you're dealing with property. And one other thing, and I think it has to do with being a smart, skeptical buyer. That car, that I think it's a Nissan, looks like a really great piece of a really great auto, but you don't know, it may not run, it may not it may have an engine that blew up. Always realize that ultimately you're taking that property as is, and while this car looks very nice, it may not be as good as it looks. It may be better, but it may not be as good as it looks. And always enter the sale with a certain amount of skepticism.
Right. Okay, let's turn to what our last slide is going to be before we start answering some questions. And what is really one of my fun topics, I think you'd agree, Carlos, is we hear stories all the time of unique circumstances of what is discovered in self-storage units sometimes. Always sort of amazing to me what people will store, also amazing to me what people will abandon for their property. But if a bidder purchases a unit and then as part of the purchase and possession of that property finds things that could be, I would call criminal or have a risk of criminality, it really is important for the bidder to disclose that to local law enforcement and to the operator that they're buying the unit from, just to make sure that they are not buying something that was the result of criminal activity, something that they can't use, like a gun that hasn't gone through proper registration in their local ordinance, based on their local ordinances and jurisdiction, may be buying something that demonstrates evidence of a crime. So understand that when you get a unit and you go through that unit, if you see something that just doesn't seem right with respect to what your sort of gut tells you, it will be a protection item for you as a bidder buyer to contact the operator concerning the fact that this was discovered in the unit and contact the police with respect to anything that may evidence criminal activity. You can't get in trouble for notifying them about what you find. You could get in trouble for discovering it and hiding it. So it's more of the cover-up is more of a crime than the crime itself. So be very careful that if you see something that you have any questions about, it's better for you to ask than to ignore it. Carlos, any true life stories? Your past?
This falls into the category of what I would call let your conscience and your appetite for risk be your guide. And there have been situations where I know an operator found basically $250,000 in a space, and after some pondering of what to do, called the police and turned it over to the police. And he kept wondering if he was a sucker for doing this until about a week or so later, a couple of questionable gentlemen showed up asking about the space, and he felt pretty good about being able to tell him, "Oh, you can get your property back really easily. I gave it. Here's Officer Smith's card, and we've turned it over to the police department." And he felt that decision actually made a lot of sense. But you're going to run into these situations. One thing I did want to mention that comes up, and most of the storage operators may announce this at the time of sale, and it's not dodgy property that we're talking about here, but it's when you run into a box that has photo albums and birth certificates and just those kind of personal items that belong to a tenant. Most operators are willing to take those back just on the off chance that the tenant will come back and it can be returned to him. They're not of any value to anybody. So one of the things, if you do find that stuff while you're going through a space, most of the operators will take them. They'll usually hold them for about 6 months, and if the tenant comes back, at least they can kind of give these really personal items back to the tenant, and it actually does make a difference from time to time. They've lost everything, but they've been able to. They've had their photo albums and their birth certificates, just those kind of personal things restored. It's surprising what a difference it can make to a tenant who's actually lost, at that moment in time, their worldly possessions. So it's one of the things I think the good buyers might want to take note of.
And I'll add, Carlos, to the fact that under certain state laws, in the bidders in those states, for example, Washington State, I know has the requirement that personal items need to be removed from the unit prior to the sale, or if discovered during the sale, returned to the operator. So again, these are all relatively state-specific issues, but as a general rule, if you buy something that doesn't have any resale value to you as a buyer, because of the personal nature of the items that are being that are discovered in the space, many times the operator will take those items back and hold them for a tenant for a certain period of time, because those are sort of irreplaceable items stored by the tenant. Again, where a state doesn't require it, they may not. They may say, you bought it, you can dispose of it, or you can keep it, whatever you want. They may not take it back, but a lot of operators try to do the right thing in these sort of situations. So I think that will do it for us, but we want to answer questions if there's any.
Thank you so much, Scott and Carlos. That was all excellent advice and information. I'm sure it was very useful to our buyers listening. So let me take a look and see if we have any good questions for you to answer. Let's see. Is it required that the buyer returns photos and personal paperwork?
I think the short answer to that, I think statutorily, the only state that requires it, as Scott said, is Washington. The other states don't have a specific requirement about that, but as we said, it can be a good thing to do, and most of the many of the operators will accept the return of that type of property if it's found in the space and hold it for the tenant.
Okay, great. So to clarify, is it by law that the operator should not go through the unit and remove things of value or make it look valuable? Must operators know the law?
That's a great question. I'm taking it from the perspective that the bidder's asking, is it appropriate for an owner to go into a space as part of an auction and take out the good things? And the answer is absolutely no. That's a violation of law. They must leave the unit as is, and make the whole unit available to a bidder for the purpose of receiving as much value as possible for all of the property as a credit against what the tenant owes the operator. Now, an operator could sell the unit in parts and by item or by lot. We typically see these units sold all together in one lot, but they could sell it item by item. But they would still have to take the money for each of those items and give it as a credit back to the tenant. So it is unlawful for an operator to pick and choose what they want out of the space before it goes to an auction. It must be all the items in the space must be sold for the purpose of claiming highest and best value for the benefit of the tenant's potential proceeds.
I do think it's important to understand that the operator can go into the space. I mean, occasionally they'll run into a situation where there's literally just a wall of boxes, and a picture of a wall of boxes would be of no value. And I mean, they do have the right to move things around so that people can get a view as to what they're looking at. But as Scott said, they can't take property from the storage unit because while they have a security interest, that property does not belong to the owner, and that would be to the detriment of the tenant. So they have some, it's not that there's like an invisible wall between them and the contents of the space, because occasionally they may have to do things to make it visible, what's in there visible to the to bidders.
Okay, great. So I know you're talking about weather. So if the facility is closed due to weather, just in general, does that day count towards time to clean out the unit?
I think as a general matter, if the owner cannot make the space available to the buyer, there would be a tolling of the time frame. Obviously, you can't perform on the contract if the weather prohibits you from coming into the storage space. And occasionally, facilities are closed because of snow and things like that. But as long as the facility is open, the time runs. And well, I just don't want to go out of the rain. It's not a good excuse. But when weather issues come, call the operator, talk to the operator about the arrangements to take the property and say, well, it's not really going to work right now because, we're in the middle of a snowstorm. I think most operators will say, you're right. And in fact, we're closed for the next day. So we'll start after that day. So just stay in contact with the owner.
So if the sale is not consummated until the unit is cleaned out, does the previous tenant have the rights to the unit at that very moment?
Well, if the question is, if they're halfway moved out of the unit and the tenant shows up, I would make an argument that the sale has already been consummated because of the bidder taking possession of the property. If the bidder has not yet taken possession of and entered the space to take property out, I think by that point, that fine line, the sale would not be completed, and the buyer would have to be excused, and the tenant could reclaim their property. But once a high bidder arrives and starts removing the property, I think the sale's been completed by that point, and the tenant coming at that late stage would have given up their rights to reclaim the property. Carlos, do you have a fine line of what you define as completed?
I think you've set basically the bar exactly right. Once the buyer is in the process of taking the property and loading it on the truck, that's too late. If the space, if the buyer hasn't gotten to the facility and it's still there, that's probably where the line is drawn. But I agree with exactly what you said.
Okay. What if the unit holds items that turned out to be stolen?
That's a really interesting question, and there is actually a little bit of case law on that very issue. And strangely enough, if you look at the self-storage law and the way it is written, it provides a lien on the property in the space. And there have been a couple of instances where the property has been in the space was in fact stolen. And the courts have ruled that the lien law applies to that property. So again, if you're and then on top of that, let's assume for a moment you're a bona fide purchaser of value, as Scott talked about earlier. You're going in there, you're a good faith bidder, you've bid on the property, you've gotten space, you removed the contents from the storage facility. You're not going to be subject to the claim of the person whose property it actually belonged to, because you're protected by being a good faith purchaser of value. So from the bidder's standpoint, I think there's little risk in that situation, and there's some case law that indicates that storage operators have a valid lien on contents, even if they're stolen, and the person who brought them there is a crook. So I think you can bid with a high degree of confidence. Scott, you have a take on that?
Yeah. So I've in that context, and it's really an interesting question. I've seen other issues where the person whose property has been stolen will pursue an action to recover their property, and many times the courts will side for the people who have lost their goods, especially if they're of a personal nature. And the damages to the high bidder who's taken possession would likely be the recovery of their money. So it's a challenging issue, but there is a risk there that there could be an action, what's called an action for replevin, that could subject the bidder to an action. Although Carlos is right, and we talked about it early on, there are laws that protect the bidder. So it's not a slam dunk either way. I will tell you that where you find people that buy property suspiciously, like the old back of a truck and buys the property, those people will not get clear title to property that they buy, and those people are subject to the risk of the return of the property. When you buy at a self-storage auction, there's certain inherent expectations that the sale is bona fide, but if there's any evidence that the buyer was working in any collusion with the seller operator, the sale will be null and void, especially on stolen property.
Yeah, I think one thing is that even if, again, if the lien is considered invalid for some reason, that's a problem between the person making the claim as owner of the property and the storage operator. And if you're just, one more person bidding on the thing at an online auction, and and again, it's very, I think that there's enough attenuation here that it is very hard for anyone, including a victim of theft, to overcome the good faith purchaser for value presumption that the sale is valid and final.
But it's a great question. It's a great question.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. I know we're a little bit over our allotted time. So I just want to say, Scott and Carlos, thank you so much. We really appreciate both of you taking the time out of your schedules today to talk with us. Hopefully that was helpful. If there's any storage buyers, if you want to feel free to stick around for a little bit longer to find out what's coming to Storage Treasures. Our product owner, Chelsea Horn, is going to take you through a few exciting new things that are going to be coming to Storage Treasures.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kim. My name is Chelsea Horn, product owner at Storage Treasures. Been here for about 5 years. I'm kind of responsible for planning the future of the product, and I do that by listening to all of you. Our focus for 2017 and 2018 is really to show you, the buyers, that we really care about you just as much as we care about the storage facilities. We want to make sure we give you as much inventory, but we want to make sure that you guys are happy as well. And so part of Kim's role as auction buyer advocate is to always be speaking to you and getting your feedback and understanding your wants and needs. And once she has that feedback, she kind of relays it to me, and I kind of plan our roadmap as a company with regard to different departments, whether it be the technology, the marketing, the sales, whatever it is. We have a roadmap and a plan and how we can continuously improve our product for you, the buyers, and for our sellers. So a couple of things that I want to share with you, and there's a lot more outside of just these couple of things here, but in 2017, throughout the rest of the year, we want to bring you an enhanced search. Right now, our search, it works to an extent, but we want to bring you something that's more technologically advanced. For instance, like if you go to like Zillow, the map is interactive, and so you can actually slide the map around, and it'll update depending on where you're positioned on it. And so we want to bring you, an enhanced search, something similar to that, with additional filters. So right now you can search by keywords or facility name, but we want to give you that interactive map where you can filter your results based off of what it is that you're looking for. We're also going to bring you customizable auction updates. So you might be familiar with many accounts that you have online where you can actually select different options of when you'd like to be notified. Right now our notification process is pretty manual, and so we want to kind of build that out in a more automated fashion where you can select what you want to be notified of. For instance, you have bookmarked facilities. You would like an email or a push notification every time one of your bookmarked facilities posts an auction. And we are going to expand on that as well. And something Kim is working on now is actually interviewing you, our buyers, to find out exactly what kind of notifications you want. Additionally, we have our pro video training that will be coming back. We took it off the website for a little while because the purchase portion of it wasn't functioning properly, and so we're in the process of bringing that back up. And what that is videos and ebooks built by the Storage Wars sellers and buyers. So the auctioneers and the auction buyers, the professional auction buyers on the show, put together a video training. We're also going to create a merchandise store where you can purchase some Storage Treasures gear. We've had some requests for it, so that should be pretty fun. We are putting together an auction buyer council, and so we want to make sure that our council represents all of you auction buyers. We're looking more for like our frequent flyers and our big spenders, and also the ones who maybe have been on our site for a really long time, maybe only bought a couple units, but we want to hear from all of you. And so we have put together an auction buyer council, and that will continue to grow and expand over the years. 2018, we are looking at a buyer's app. And again, it's all about interviewing you and finding out what your needs are. And so we want to do that before creating this app, because we want it to be an application that you absolutely love. So you may hear from us in the coming year about that app. We're also going to integrate social media. We did have that previously, but it did drop off when we launched the new site. And so we want to give you the ability to share auctions via storagetreasures.com. Also, we want to give you the ability to comment and talk amongst fellow auction buyers on the actual site. Treasure Chest is something that we did have up and running a while back, but wasn't really built in a design that works for all of you. And so we do plan to rework that and make it a more simplified classified section where you can buy and resell items to the same audience who actually bid on the units with you. Or say, for instance, you saw something in a unit but you didn't win it, and then next week, you know, that same dresser or that same tool chest is up on the classified section. You can just get what you wanted, not you know, the whole unit. So we're hoping this becomes a useful tool for all of you. Again, the Auction Buyer Council, we have a retreat each year. Our first retreat is coming up in the month of July. So following that, we will kind of figure out how it worked, and we're using it to gather all of your feedback and understand, again, your wants and needs. And so we will continue that through 2018 and hopefully get an even bigger buyer council, which Kim Vecchiola, our buyer advocate, is actually responsible for coordinating this and locating our buyer council members. And so please reach out to her if you're interested in this opportunity. And then in addition to that, you know, we have many more things in the works, but these are some of our big bucket items I wanted to share with you. At any time, if you feel like there's something that would be, you know, so beneficial to you, or that would be a really neat thing that you think we should offer, please reach out to us and let us know. Kim would be more than willing to take those phone calls or those emails, and then she can definitely relay the information to me. So never hesitate to let us know what would make your guys' lives easier when it comes to your storage auction buying on Storage Treasures and auction buying in general. Please reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. So we're really excited to announce that we just launched our new blog on the Storage Treasures website. So this provides a lively forum for you, our buyers, to express your views, share tips, hints, and things with other buyers. So if you're interested in learning more about buying, reselling, the process in general, fun stories, go ahead and take a look at our Storage Treasures blog, and you can find that at blog.storagetreasures.com. And in addition to that, we're always looking for bloggers. So we have a pro contributors page on the site for bloggers, for experienced buyers that we have that are looking to share stories or some maybe tips to share with other buyers. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me, and then we can get you on the site, which would be great. And then I think Chelsea's going to talk a little bit about charity storage.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So I just want to touch briefly on what CharityStorage.org is. It's one of our partners. Basically, CharityStorage.org partners with storage facilities throughout the country. And what it is a facility manager will allocate a single storage unit to be a charity storage unit, and members of the community typically will donate items to that unit. And so once the unit is full, the facility will post the auction on our website, and it'll be advertised as a charity storage unit, which you might have seen on the website. You can also search for these specifically by typing in the keyword charity. And then once that auction sells online, the proceeds actually get donated to a couple different charities. One is Cure Cancer Research, and then typically a charity of the facility's choice, usually something local in the community. And so if you ever see those units, you know, if you want to participate, please feel free. But just understand that the contents is usually donated from the community. So it's usually quality items. Of course, you know, review the pictures and the description, but don't be hesitant just because it's marked as a charity unit. It's actually, you know, a thought-through process, and we really want to help give back to our communities. So, you know, if you see those and you have the funds to bid on them, you know, please take part in those. And then also, if you guys need any additional information, our phone number and email address is down there at the bottom of the page. If you want to discuss any of the topics that we touched on today, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Chelsea. So I think that's all the information we have for you today. We hope that you all enjoyed this presentation and it helped answer most of your questions. So as Chelsea said, feel free to email us at info@storagetreasures.com and we will respond to your question. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.